So, Maguelonne Déjeant-Pons, you work as the Executive Secretary for the European Convention on Landscape at the Council of Europe. You're in charge of the European Day, Heritage European Days. And it is in this respect that you're joining us today and you're introducing this symposium. Maybe it will also be interesting to mention, because we were talking in the coach previously, that you work also at the Democratic Participation DG at the Council of Europe. So you deal with the heritage and landscape, and but this also falls under responsibility of the citizens. But it also concerns the public authorities. So I'll give you the floor. So I would like to start that I don't like tree avenues, but I like tree avenues. So I would like to speak about the role of the Council of Europe, but first of all, I would like to thank the president of the association, Mr. Eric Münchler, president of the ALLÉES-AVENUES, allés-d'Avenir president, and Chantal Pradine also, who is at the heart of all these activities, in all meaning of the term, and who is really preoccupied in the enhancement and preservation of these tree avenues. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you at Liffol-le-Grand and in Lorraine, because my grandmother actually is from Longwy, and who met my grandfather during the First World War, and she was a nurse at the Red Cross, and my grandfather, coming from Montpellier, south of France, then was cured, and then that's how we met actually on this territory. And it's deeply moving to see that this centenary of the armistice takes place here in this area. So the associations also bears the name and with the term future, avenir, future, which means that we have to get rooted in the past to see what we can do in the future. So the Council of Europe, then, as you know, I mean, has its headquarters in Strasbourg. It's not that far. It's across the Vosges. It's not that far, but still, I mean, to come here, as I was joking, I mean, you should take the horse and ride with the horse to be here rather quickly. But then to illustrate, you can see the image of the participation of the Council of Europe, because we've been working on the democratic participation. So when we speak about landscape, then we have to commit ourselves. And as you can see the pictures in the landscape, working for the landscape. But this is not enough, as I was telling you and then telling Denis Cordonnier. The public authorities also should support this work, and this is this intergovernmental role which is being developed. And so the European Council has 47 state members, so the great Europe, as we may say so, and the objectives, as Chantal Pradine said, is from war to peace. From war, why? Because this organization was created not after the First World War, but after the Second World War. And it is the iconic treaties which were adopted at that time was the European Convention of Human Rights, with the institution of the European Court of Justice. And this is the only place where individuals may lodge complaint against a government, to complain if they have been through the internal legal system and they cannot find any other solutions. They go to the European Court of Justice. Now, the question with this question of democracy, there are world forums taking place on democracy being held on various topics, and also because democratic security is based on law. And then the third strand is the prevalence of law. And so this is why the Council of Europe that brings some intergovernmental treaties which are being ratified by the member states, and this is the fundamentals, the legal fundamentals and institutional fundamentals, and which guarantees the perennity of all these works in time. So from war to peace, why? Because once we've been developing this structure, then the representative of all the various governments have to meet in meetings, they have to represent their countries, they have to develop what we sometimes call a kind of a collective intelligence, so that we can try and find some answers to the future, so the questions raised in the future. And for the future, the main issues, we may say, beyond non-conflict matters, are the problems regarding environment and how we can try to reach a sustainable development together, taking into account all the wealth of the territories, being natural or cultural heritage and legacy, with all the issues we're aware of regarding climate change, population mobility, and other aspects which are topical issues, and also talking about the species disappearing. So this is the organization with all its 47 member states, which is not close to non-European states. On the contrary, I mean, this organization is really open, and there are conventions open to states who are non-member states. So today I'm going to speak about the European Convention of the Landscape, and the philosophy of the text and spirit of the text is in the preamble introduction of this text. And it's rather interesting if we look at the thematic of the tree and tree avenues, because in the spirit of this convention we find the four aspects which are quite interesting, four facets, if I may say so. Now, as a matter of fact, we say that the landscape is of general interest, and so tree avenues are also of a general interest. So what are the various aspects? We're talking about ecological and environmental aspects. Tree avenues also contribute to the biodiversity, the ecological connection or corridors, as we say. And I'm glad that Jacques Stein is with us today, because some time ago the first working group took place in the pan-European ecological groups, with various texts which were developed and signed in the National Convention. At that time, I mean, we launched this work with the framework of the pan-European strategy on the biological strategy and landscape strategy, and we organized in Belgium some meetings on this theme, corridors and ecological corridors. So thank you very much for participating. And so the cultural aspect is very important, as we can see it, with a very symbolic aspect linked to the conflicts, linked to the celebration of the beauty of these tree avenues, the aspect covering culture, art, painting as well. So it's a kind of a multifaceted topic. The social aspect, how the tree avenues, how the landscape also participate to a social need, and the thirst of a quality framework, and how they become a territory where we can find inspiration. The economical aspect also should not be disregarded. And I've seen that in the program we speak of employment, so job creation, so the possibility to generate an economic value for this topic. And it's true, actually, because the wealth is to be found on the territory. You just need to highlight them and enhance them and try to find the ideas to promote and foster all these initiatives which generate revenue, generating jobs as well, and quality jobs. So I'm not going to read the whole text, but as you can see, these ideas are very important. And the last sentence of this preamble is that the landscape implies rights and responsibilities for each individual, and it's very interesting to be aware of these rights. And so the Committee of Ministers has adopted a recommendation on the contribution of the Convention to the human rights, to democracy and sustainable development. And at the moment, we are working on the responsibility strand to see and try and identify the various responsibilities which are entrusted to each individual. So why should we worry about this topic? It is obvious because the development we had to face over the last few years then developed and did not contribute in a qualitative way to the development of the territory. So we have to rethink the whole thing and see what we can do to do something better for the future. With this key word, which is in the convention, which is quality, because quality sometimes we develop without having a sort of long-term vision in terms of quality for this sustainable development. Now, the application field of the convention is rather interesting because it's not only we're not dealing with big sites and iconic spaces, but it's also dealing with, apart from these iconic spaces, spaces we would qualify as ordinary, bracket, because I think, no territory is an ordinary or casual territory. It just needs to be highlighted, enhanced, promoted, and analyzed also with a lot of attention being paid. And sometimes they need to be regenerated, and sometimes it can have a second life if we try to make efforts. And this is very important because the Council of Europe works for the human rights, and there are people living in these decaying territories. So what could we do so that we restore the quality of this territory, which sometimes are sort of peri-urban territories and sometimes territories which are not being cared for. So there are 39 states in the Council of Europe which committed themselves in this approach. And so there was a book published, a very interesting book, and Chantal Pradig did this report, which is very well appreciated by all the participants, regarding the tree avenues in the landscape, and this work generated a lot of attention. And so I do not have time to enter into detail, but these books and these are available, actually. So there are magazines, books, and it is an intergovernmental treaty, and so all the various countries, are committed themselves to develop some policies, and you can see on the slide the various measures which are being taken to develop these landscape policies. So again, I do not have time to go through these slides, but they are available on site. There are some governmental meetings as well taking place, and then step by step, all this work can be seen on the website. Everything which has been done on the international level, the national level, and regional level as well. And there are some workshops being organized on various topics, and so the question on trees is always prevailing. Sometimes not directly, but trees are always part of the preoccupation during the meetings, with various meetings being organized. And avenues and trees are also the basics for peace. As you can see, there are a kind of cross-border area, and the landscape managed to connect various territories and restore the dialogue also. And it was the same for Latvia, with all these countries taking part. Now, I do not have time to explain all these projects, but they're all dealing with trees. So, as a conclusion, I can say that this topic is very important. I was going to say interesting, but it's more than interesting. It's really important. And we really have to take this into account. I would like to conclude saying that on 20th of October each year, we celebrate the International Day of the Landscape at the Council of Europe, and this will be open to non-European states. I invite you to go on the website of the convention. Thank you very much for your attention.